My name is debumaiya, and I am going to draw my life. I was born in a town called Maple Ridge in the province of British Columbia, which is a bustling community a few miles east of Vancouver. So there we were, the three of us. There was me. I was my mom and dad's firstborn, and there was my mom, who I remember at the time had hair going down to her waistline, and there was my dad with his shaggy hair and beard. I was right around when I was like 2.5. We welcomed a new addition to our family. So there was my dad, my mom, and me, and I had a little brother named Brian. Just before I was about to turn 3 years old, my family and I moved out of Maple Ridge, and we all headed east to a smaller town called Mission, where I later learned my mom made a rather impromptu and significant purchase. I guess she was looking at this empty lot or house being built on it, and before she could stop and think, she actually bought the place. And I guess while she was still in a state of utter disbelief and shock, she had to tell my dad about this purchase she made earlier that day. And I can imagine the look on my dad's face and the state of shock and disbelief he was in. But as he looked at the place himself, he was rather impressed and told my mom that she did a good thing. So we were all set to move into this brand new 3-bedroom, 2-story house that had a big backyard with lots of trees in it, and it had a sand pit in one corner where I played all my toys upon it. The following Christmas, while me and my brother were playing with all our toys that we received as gifts, we welcomed another addition to the family when my mom brought home our baby sister. So kindergarten rolls around, and I had the distinct pleasure of experiencing school in a one-room schoolhouse, which was segregated 2 blocks away from the main school. And I had my best chum living across the street from me that attended the same class as I guess by the end of the day I was feeling rather overwhelmed, and I started crying, wanting to go home. I was wanting my mom. It was right around the time the kindergarten teacher consoled me and told me everything was going to be okay, and kindergarten was a blast. I think it was about a week or two into the school year that my kindergarten teacher noticed something wasn't right about me. I'm sure my mom did notice prior to that time herself, but it was my teacher that planted her concerns into my mom's head. I was timid. I rarely talked in class, especially orally, and when I did, my speech was underdeveloped. I think a few of my classmates took notes as well. So I guess she told my mom one day what was concerning her and suggested that I should be taken to see somebody and get looked at. So I was sent out to Vancouver, and I was met by several specialists, psychologists, pediatricians, etc., etc., etc. I remember them all doing tests on me, and they themselves seemed rather baffled as well. But in the end, my diagnosis was inconclusive. I guess by the end of the school year, it was determined that I had to repeat kindergarten the next year until a new school opened up that could meet my needs. So off I was, sent to grade 1 and 2 in a new school that had a remedial classroom where I befriended a mentally challenged girl and an energetic redheaded fella. Since I became homesick, I requested that I return to my old school where I felt right at home. It was during that time when my family got our first family pet, which was a cat that was rather rambunctious and playful, but he used his claws quite excessively. He usually ended up scratching up my face or launching a spring attack on our bare legs, that usually had my sister screaming in terror. When I was in grade 5, I took my sole participation in organized sports when 2 classmates and I formed a bowling team. It was fun, actually trying to achieve to be the best youth bowling league team out there, especially one day when I blew the alley away with some spectacular games I played. I felt a true sense of success when our team made the youth league tournament the second year. I still have all my trophies neatly displayed. As long as I can remember growing up during elementary school, my parents always threw the wildest parties every weekend that usually lasted until the next morning. So many of these nights were alcohol-fueled affairs, which usually climaxed right around the time they all started dancing on top of our coffee table, which shook the foundations of our neighborhood. I remember waking up one morning after one of those parties only to find that our kitchen stove was tipped over on one side in the middle of our kitchen floor, which I later learned was caused by an amazing feat of strength by my mom while she was trying to retrieve a smoldering cigarette butt she accidentally tossed. Another morning, I wandered into the bathroom to find a nearly cryptic sentence written on the toilet seat by a neighbor who was the neighborhood clown. Was he really the Zodiac Killer, you say? But fortunately for us, he usually dressed up as a jolly Saint Nick every Christmas for us kids on the block, who usually raided my mom and dad's liquor cabinet, and on some occasions, he passed out on our bathroom floor. Yep. Well, what can I say about my life after grade 5? Well, I was struggling in my schoolwork for some reason, and I was ready to say goodbye to elementary school and go into high school. And yes, I was still a square peg trying to squeeze through a round hole. My family's biggest glimmer of hope came in the form of a $1 scratch ticket that my dad purchased, and he won $5 grand on that very same ticket, which was rather exciting for us. It's the most money like all of us seen in our life, apparently. Yeah, I still remember that picture of him holding up his check, his smile glimmering underneath that thick horseshoe mustache he had back in the day. Anyways, it afforded us our first real family vacation down to Disneyland. It was really neat seeing Southern California and going to San Diego and SeaWorld and all the other communities in between. So here I was in my senior year of high school when I decided to pull up my grades and strive to be a success. It was my decision to grow out my hair and my facial hair as well. No high school sweetie to speak of, but I felt a bit of a spark when I attended my first teenage party when a fellow grad hosted a huge get-together on her parents' property where a huge screen was set up with stage lights and that played music videos throughout the night. It was the first time that I experienced my first alcoholic buzz that at that time felt rather surreal. I guess was a bit of a surprise and shock to my fellow grads to see me cut loose and truly enjoy myself. So the day came with myself feeling full of pomp and circumstance when I graduated high school with a future full of dreams. So where was my future headed in the days to come? I pondered. It was right around the time when I was presented with an article that harkens back to what was puzzling my kindergarten teacher, when finally it began to make sense on why I was such a square peg stuck in a round hole growing up throughout the years. It was a few years later when I gained steady employment at a newspaper production plant, where on most nights I was buried in a pile of scattered flyers that led to copious amounts of overtime, in which during 1 week see me clock in at a mind-blowing 74 hours, which resulted in one hefty paycheck. It led me to the purchase of my first vehicle, which was a third-generation Camaro that seemed to be living on borrowed time, clinging on to its last few thousand miles of life. It led me to experience my first romantic relationship with a fellow female co-worker, and for 4 months we started dating each other and we fell in love, but ultimately the relationship fizzled after 4 months. Ultimately, It catapulted myself out of the failure to launch crowd when I finally purchased a place of my own at the ripe old age of 30. And so I moved out to Abbotsford in an 825-foot square condo, which I purchased for $100,000. And I really felt I truly was a real success in life, and my life was going pretty well. About 5 years after I moved in, I decided to buy a laptop and have internet installed in my condo. It wasn't very long when I became bold and I decided to launch my own YouTube channel. I felt a bit of a struggle trying to make quality videos those early days, but as time went on, I improved significantly. It wasn't too long when a few people took notice of me. I got the surprise of my life when a black woman about my age noticed me. We began chatting with each other night after night, and before we knew it, we became an internet couple. I truly felt like a big YouTube star being infatuated by a fellow YouTuber who lived a long distance away from me. Then it was decided that we both meet each other later on, when for the first time I migrated to the East Coast of the United States. So here I was, ready to take on a cross-continental journey. I experienced lengthy layovers in Seattle and Detroit, and let me tell you, I was feeling exhausted when I made my way to upstate New York, where my lover was living at the time. Sullivan County, here I come. Oh, please be kind. The moment had arrived when the both of us finally met, and we embraced each other. We spent lots of time touring her hometown and the surrounding area. I got to know her mom, who she was living with at the time, and her grandmother, who lived down the block. The biggest thrill I got was when I got to visit the site at the original Woodstock Festival, since I am a huge fan of that era and the bands that played there during that time. I often reflect on the story about when my mom bought a house on impulse many years ago, for I myself made an impromptu decision when my new lover and I decided to get engaged. So later on, it was decided for her to come live with me. So back home I go, taking the same path as my arrival, with only a stopover in Salt Lake City where I almost got stranded. Then it was back home to Vancouver, feeling homesick and such. So out came my fiance to spend the rest of my life with me. Unfortunately, trying to get into Canada and trying to get her to become a Canadian citizen proved to be rather difficult. And after 4 months of spending time with her in my place, I found out she was rather difficult to live with, and our marriage ended up in a swirl of incompatibility, and later on we decided to get a divorce. After my ex-wife went back down to the States, I got my first pet of my very own, a cat named Sammy. And since Sammy spent so many nights alone since I was away at work, I decided to get another cat named Tucker to keep him company. Well, after 18 years employed in the newspaper industry, I found out that my department was being sold, and I was presented with a huge severance pay, which foolhardily I decided to live off of until the next year, when I went through a series of jobs that either laid me off or I felt that didn't work out so well. Until I found a new career, soaking up soap suds and being dusted by powder with the rest of the Powder Puff Girls. Well, I deeply apologize for the length of this video. I watch other YouTubers do Draw My Life videos, and I figure I should come up with one of my own. I'd like to thank you for following with me throughout the years and subscribing to my channel. Yes, my condo is half paid off. Yahoo! Anyways, all I have to say is thank you.